Okay, we're at the end of the session. This is Max, this is Aspen, and this is their roadmap to success. These dogs don't really have any respect for people's personal space, and really not hard to understand why. They don't really have a lot of rules. They're really, the only exercise they get is playing around outside, which she's basically a 1-year-old puppy. He's 7 or 8. But she just literally grabs him by the side of his face and just walks around the house with him. He doesn't ever fight back, but I'm worried that eventually someday that might actually happen. So in this video, I want to talk about all the little things we covered in the session, hopefully add a little bit of structure to get these guys to start respecting their humans as authority figures. You see how nudgy he is. Now I have a bunch of treats in my hand, but just because I have treats doesn't mean they should be able to molest my hand like this. So it probably would be wise to teach them a leave it exercise, which you can find on my website or on YouTube. But basically, I started off this session by talking about exercise because I think a lot of her unwanted behavior is a result of having too much pent-up energy. Because they're so bad on the leash, they pull so hard, either one of them, now they have 2 of them, they're competing, the guardians don't really walk them. So the exercise is really limited to roughhouse in the backyard, but that's not really helping them develop any self-control or respect for the humans because they're just playing willy-nilly with themselves. So what I would, one of the things I recommend the guardians start what we call an exercise journal. Basically just write down the name, the date at the top of a piece of paper, write down each dog's name and make a column, and then write down the time and then how long the walk was, the time and how many fetches. Some creative ways that you can exercise your dog. The laser, they both like chasing the laser. That's a great way to exercise a dog. The other thing you can do is go to the top of the stairs with a bunch of treats, touch the dog's nose with a treat, throw it like that, and then when the dog, although these guys don't track very well, they will get better at it the more they do it. But then when the dog goes in, remember, anytime you give a treat, the dog should hear the command word after the treat goes in their mouth. So throw the treat to the bottom of the stairs. We have kind of a bent staircase, so you have to bounce it off the wall, or have one person up and one person down. Do this with one dog at a time. When the dog comes down the stairs, as soon as they lick up the treat, say the word down, or a word that means to go downstairs. And then call them back up, and then give them a treat that means up, or something that means to go up the stairs. And that way, basically, you practice going up and down the stairs. I would do it when they're both, no food in their stomach, and do it with them separately, and do it each time. That was not a good place to split your paw, buddy. But do it with each dog until they stop coming up. This is demand barking, which is another problem that we worked on a little bit. But basically, you want to count the number of up downs, as each up down is 1, and keep on counting until you get to the point where the dog stops coming, and you're like, okay, maybe for him that's 25. For her, it's probably going to be closer to 50. Once you find out their maximum number, then you can start exercising them in smaller, shorter runs. We think of exercise as one long exercise routine for the day. Dogs need 4, 5, 6, 7 exercise routines that are 5 or 10 minutes each, sprinkled throughout the day. Now, when they get really boisterous, the demand barking, wait for the demand barking to stop, but that should be our indicator. We need to go outside and exercise the dogs with a game of fetch or throwing the treats up and down the stairs like we talked about. Damn, that's passive training. We'll talk about that in a minute. The laser they also liked playing with, chasing, and maybe we have a certain loop that we call each revolution, so you can count the number of revolutions. Something else you can do is what we call scent training. Scent training is maybe you have the dogs outside. This is a perfect picture. Why don't I have my camera? Oh, we're filming. But you basically, what you want to do is hide a bunch of treats in the room, and then basically the dogs come in and they start looking for the treats, and I would do it with each dog one at a time. And scent training is very physically draining for the dogs, and so because they're using a different muscle, their brain. So for the exercise journal, write down the date at the top, and then write down each dog's name, make a column for each dog, write down the time and how many fetches, the time and how many laser revolutions, the time and number of up downs, or whatever it is. The idea is, and then also put down like what time you feed them, if there's anything noteworthy that goes on, they explode, or things like that. Basically, the idea is at the end of the day, we want to give them each dog a letter grade, A through F. And so let's say that we do, both dogs get a C. Well, the next day, maybe we get him some an extra walk, and hers, maybe she gets an extra 3 games of fetch. Or we add a couple repetitions to each quantity of fetch, or whatever it is. Keep on playing around with these variables until you get to the point where her behavior is more important, or exercise is more important than his, but where both dogs get an A+ for their exercise, or their behavior throughout the day. Now you know what the maximum amount of exercise that they need is in order to be successful. Now, burning off the excess energy is not going to solve the problems, but it is going to make solving the problems a lot faster. Crash. That's passive training. talk about in a minute. Okay, so the exercise journal and increasing their daily exercise is going to be monumentally important. Another thing they might want to consider is getting a doggy backpack for her and filling up a couple bottles of water. It just makes the walk a lot more efficient. Okay, the other thing we talked about were rules and structure. Dogs really don't have any rules. And because dogs go through life probing to determine where boundaries limits are, a lack of rules very easily confuses a dog into thinking that we're peers. And if we're peers, then listening to you is optional. And so some of the rules I suggested, the dogs are actually, ironically, not doing one right now. They're not on the couch. One of the rules I say is no furniture for at least 30 days. And be strict about these rules for 30 days. No exceptions. We have a tendency to think of breaking a rule as a positive or something to aspire to. Dogs probe to find out where the limit is. And when we let them break the rule, it actually confuses them into thinking that's not actually a rule. So while you think you're doing something nice for your dog, you're actually confusing your dog. So when you're enforcing rules, you want to be very consistent for at least a month. And then after a month, you can kind of back off a little bit. But it's going to depend on the dog. Some dogs are going to catch things faster. Other dogs are going to need a little bit more structure, just like us. Some people learn math faster than others. So one of the rules, not being allowed the furniture. Now, to get them off the furniture, what I did is I took a treat and I threw it on the ground. And as soon as the dog licked it up off the ground, as I showed you a little bit earlier in the video, I said the word off. And then now, at that point, I would sit here like this, and the dog tried to go on the couch, I would flash my hand and block them. Now, I also mentioned getting some X mats, which might help the guardians keep the dogs and give them a habit of not getting on the furniture. And a great way that by putting those on these, especially because the dogs are not allowed to be on or not kenneled. So when the guardians are gone, or if one of the guardians is sitting there, we can have these with the X mat, so you don't have to be physically policing that the dogs are doing it kind of on their own. Now, whenever I take away the furniture, I always like to give the dogs a dog bed. Now, they have a dog bed, but they don't really use it because there's more status being up here. The higher a dog sits, more rank or social status they have. So for the dog bed, I was tossing treats on the dog bed, and we were calling it Asia. If you have another room in the house where dogs hang out, get another dog bed. Remember, try to get the dog bed, get one on Groupon, get one that's a light color, like a light cream, a white, or a light gray. So when we leave the treat on there, the dog sees it. The ones I like getting are the Sealy Posturepedic or the memory foam. Really, it's just foam on the inside. But as you can see, like here, where there's lumps. So I can drop a treat here, and you can't see it from your perspective because it's behind the lump. If you get one that's just rigid instead of like a down, like a comforter, the dogs will be able to see the treat on it right away. You're going to drool all over my pants before I have dinner tonight, huh? Yes. Okay. Other rules, making the dog sit before we let them in or out the door. Sit. I tell them to sit once. If they don't sit within 3 seconds, I walk away, sit down. Now, they're probably going to be doing some demand barking at that point. All right, so let's go ahead. Off. So the demand barking is going to cause, is because we look at them or we correct them or whatever it is. Any attention we give our dogs is validating. And anything we pet them, anything they're doing when we pet them is what we're rewarding. So I'm guessing this jumping up and this invading personal space is because the dogs come over and we invade like this and the guardian pets. Well, we just do it because we're trying to be nice, but the dog interprets that the guardian likes it when I invade their space. They like it when I rub against them. They like it when I jump up on them. So we inadvertently train them to do things we don't want, like this. All right, so let me see. Other rules, sit. Not being allowed to be within 7 feet of a human who's eating. The human should eat before the dogs are fed, and I would feed him first and then her second. And I would look for a pantry or a room where you can control their access point. Put food in his bowl, don't let him go in the room. And then whoever's feeding him should take a couple chips, crackers, something you can eat in 5 or more bites. A real meal is even better, but if it's not convenient, just a couple bites of a carrot. Then invite Max to come in. When Max comes in, when he takes his first bite of food, use passive training to give each dog a unique command word. I have 4 dogs. I say grub, chow, feast, and eat. I did not come up with eat. I like fun command words because dogs read our facial expression. The way I taught my dogs this is when my first dog would go to take his bite of food, I just said the word chow when he took his first bite of food. So when he hears the word chow, there's food in his mouth. When my other 3 dogs hear the word chow, there's no food in their mouth. So to him it means eat, to them it does not mean eat. So I would come up with a unique word for each dog to eat. Unless some people will say like sushi or meatball, your favorite restaurant name or whatever it is. And again, you saw me starting to push him off. I stopped. It's instinctive. But dogs only push each other when they're playing or mounting. So if I push him off, I'm really teaching him to come back and push against me some more. These guys have had plenty of practice of pushing against their guardians. So we want to do that as limited as possible. Okay, let me think. So once Max is done eating, then he has to leave the area. Then I will bring Aspen in. When Aspen comes in, she takes her first bite of food. She hears that command word, and Max is not allowed to get in the room. That way the dogs see the humans acting like leaders by enforcing the couch rule, not letting them around humans who are eating, not letting them be next to each other when they're eating, and things along those lines. Another rule I have is I don't let them in the kitchen when we're cooking. So maybe from the work island to the counter on this side, and from the work island to the refrigerator on that side, that little L, off limits. Now, one of the little secrets that I do, one of the tricks, I use the escalating consequences that went off camera to enforce that rule. One of the tricks that I do is I do a warm-up. So when we're actually cooking, we're worried about the ingredients and the order and stirring and all that fun stuff. Well, we're distracted, and that allows the dog to come in and take advantage of us. So what I do instead is go in the kitchen, microwave a piece of bacon, put it on the work island or on the stove or somewhere so the dogs can smell it, and then simulate like you're cooking. Knock some pots and pans around, sit. And every time the dog crosses the threshold, you use the third escalating consequence, march deliberately at that dog until it gets outside the line. Then take one step backwards and pause. Remember, your authority goes whatever direction you're pointing. So if you're using the consequences to move the dog back, and you get across the line, and the line's here, and I turn and walk back that way, the dogs are guaranteed to cross that line. So at first, take steps backwards. When you step back, take a left, right, and stop. Just pause for a second. If they stay still, take another left, right, and stop. If they start to come forward, then you rush towards them. So this is, you're going back and forth, and again, this is going to be easier to achieve if you do it with one dog separately, as opposed to trying it with both dogs at the same time. Teach the dog first the behavior. I talked off camera about breaking things down in individual steps, helping the dog practice one step at a time over and over till we move to the next step. Only when the dog knows the first step do I go to the second step. And I do all the individual steps, and once they know how to behave on all the individual steps, then I bring them together for all the steps together in the easiest capacity possible, again with a single dog. And then I gradually work it back to a real world situation. When the dog can handle it and behave exactly how I want the whole situation, then I bring the two dogs together. Once both dogs can do it separately, then I bring them together and practice again the easiest situation possible. So always backing up a step and always helping the dogs practice behaving the way that you want is going to be great. Now again, this is too close. Now if the guardian wants the dog here, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm guessing that normally he does this and the guardians reach over and pet him. And anything we do when we're petting our dog is what we're rewarding. So we're inadvertently training our dog to invade our personal space. So now I also went over what I call petting with a purpose and passive training. Petting with a purpose is he was asking for attention. If I pet him here, then I'm rewarding him for doing what he wants. So instead, what I do is I'm going to use a hand motion to put him into a sit. Sit. Now, if he knows to sit, I can just tell him to sit. As soon as he sits, I pet him under his chin and I say the word sit and nothing else. Not good sit, not what a good boy, just sit. After a while, what will happen is, right, we'll get to passive training. There we go. Down. Or is that the word you guys use? Okay. Fail. That was a fail jump on the couch. But the idea is I want to reward him for desired actions. Desired actions. Not for what he wants. And this is defined barking. This is basically petulance. Now, if I'm giving him a treat here, this would be rewarding this. All I'm doing is redirecting his attention. The dog's nose controls 60% of their brain. So if he's sniffing this treat, as you hear, he can't be barking at me, so I'm distracting him. But if he barks and we say, shut up, or stop, or we correct him, that's rewarding. That's going to make him do it more often. So for petting with a purpose is it's super easy. So he wants this treat, sit. Sit. Then he gets the treat or the pet or whatever. Now, if I'm giving a treat, I always say the command word after the treat goes in the mouth, not before. And after a while, what will happen is the dog will start coming and sitting in front of you to prepay for attention. When he does it, make sure you reach over and pet him and say sit or whatever it is. Otherwise, he can go back to jumping up on you, invading personal space. And be careful about rewarding him for a sit that's this close. I know the guardians don't mind it, but their guest might not like it. So if that's the case, if I want to pet him, sit. Sit. Ask him to move a couple feet away before we actually pet him. Off. There we go. Again, be force-free. Passive training, which I talked about a couple times, is basically waiting for the dog to organically offer you the behavior that you want without any influence from you whatsoever. So if every time the dog comes up to you, pet it and say, come, well, there's like this, come. He didn't come to me because I intended or asked him to. He just did the end result that I'm looking for, and he got a reward. Well, if every time they come and sit next to you, you're suddenly petting them. Every time they lay down, you're petting them. They come to you, they're petting them. Whatever these, they bring you a ball, you say the name of the ball, and you pet them or give them attention. After a while, you're showing the dog these are positive, desirable actions, and these are things that are guaranteed to get a human's attention. We inadvertently train dogs to do the things we don't want by petting them when they jump up on us. Or petting him right here. I'm petting him for getting on the couch. I don't mean to. Most people don't. I actually know what I'm doing right here. Most people don't even think about it. They just think about it as being nice. But it actually confuses the dog. So having the dog see you as an authority figure, engenders more respect for that. You know, you can't treat an authority figure the same way you treat a peer or a friend. And so the more that the dogs start to see the humans as someone they have to earn attention from as opposed to taking or demanding, the more they're going to be respectful in other regards. And it also gives the guardians the ability to help them practice self-control and discipline. The dogs really don't have a lot of self-control because they just haven't been asked to practice those sort of things. Asking the dog to sit before it earns its reward, or rewarding passive training and things along those lines, are great ways to help the dogs understand what it is that we do want from them. Now, because they pull so much on the leash, the guardian mentioned that, well, I already went through that story about leashing them up. A couple things you should do. Every once in a while, just rap on the wall like that. That means that somebody's about to come through the door. But now when I'm doing it, they go to the door, and none of the humans are getting up, and nobody comes through the door. After a while, they get less and less worked up for that sound, and eventually, they'll stop doing it altogether. Now for the leash, so that's what I mean. I think you can see from the camera. She's just grabbing the hold of him. Now, eventually, one of these days, he's probably going to react to it, and I think that's basically her way of saying, I don't have enough exercise. So when that happens, I'd like the guardians to immediately get the laser and laser her around, put him in the backyard for a second, run her up and down the stairs, play fetch, or whatever it is. But that's what basically she's saying, I got too much energy. He's saying, please, somebody help me out. I can't do all this heavy lifting on my own. And because he's a dog, the guardian's been kind of counting on him to correct her, but he's not correcting her. So she's not learning lessons. What she actually is learning is to keep on pushing and be more boisterous, which isn't going to happen. So again, when these sort of things happen, and what the guardians interpret that is that means that we need to go outside and get a little exercise. I know, I'm telling you, or play fetch or whatever it is. All right, so hopefully we're going to have James come by, and James is going to, there we go. Then we got the laser. There we go. See, easy redirection. Now be careful with the laser because the laser is going to make them more excited, not less excited. So if you do have friends that are going to come over, make sure that they go out and play fetch a little bit first, or the laser, or running up and down the stairs, or go for a walk, or whatever it is. The idea is to keep on getting the dogs prepared for whatever it is. If we exercise the heck out of them, and then guests come over, and your guests are like, "Oh my God, your dogs are so relaxed." You're like, "Of course, we hired Doggone Problems. They showed us how to do this." No, we're just teaching them that this is the best way, this is what we want, we're expecting from them, and we put them in position to succeed because when people come in, we've already taken off that top level of energy and exercise, and they're just easier to deal with. So if you have guests or neighbors or people like that that are coming by, make sure you exercise them ahead of time. Now, in the video above this, we went over how to teach your dogs not to jump up on people when they come through the door. Right after we shot that video, we didn't shoot a video, but I showed the guardians another technique, which is basically just to come to the door, open the inside door, leave the outside door closed, so screen door, you can still see the dog, and then basically just stand up there and wait for the dog's energy to subside. When it settles down, then I reach for the door again. That reach is going to cause them to be excited, so I pull my arm back. I'm going to do this back and forth and back and forth. Eventually I can jiggle it, eventually I can open it. By the time they actually come inside, the dogs are calm. Now again, practice this with the dogs separately, one at a time. And eventually you get to the point where the dogs have been trained because we've trained and taught them how we want them to behave when we have people come to the door. Not just playtime. Come here. Aspen, come here. This is Aspen, this is Max. Sit. Old dog gets the last treat. This is the roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.